Today we get to spend some time with our friend, Pastor Whit George, who's the senior pastor of Church on the Move here in Tulsa. For a number of years, we've built a great relationship with Church on the Move and have been inspired by the different conferences that they host, the different things that they do, and just building relationships with some of their pastors and staff. They've definitely been an inspiration. So today, I'm very excited to get to sit down with him and hear about the incredible things that God's doing in Church on the Move and through Church on the Move for the Tulsa area. So come with us. We're going to see what God's doing here at this great church. We have tons of respect for you, for your dad, for the ministry of Church on the Move. You lead in the church world, and you've been a great inspiration to us, and we've learned tons. So again, we're very grateful for the opportunity just to sit down. You guys kind of started a journey a couple of years ago. Church in 30 years, now you're handing off from dad to son. What was that journey like for you? What was the...
Oh man,
yeah.
How long you got? It was awesome. I mean, it's so much respect for my dad just for being able to see that. So many leaders really kind of get caught up in for a lot of different reasons, but just in, what am I going to do after this? And how does this happen? And, and is there anybody there? And my dad, just all along the way, God really led him, and he was to raise other people up and to be open-handed with his ministry. That's incredible that would happen. How that goes, how that practically works out. I mean, it's certainly challenging just trying to walk out a transition with your family, all kinds of dynamics involved. But that said, I mean, it's been really, really good. My dad, a couple of weeks ago, came in after a service that I preached, and he just grabbed me and he just looked at me and said, "I just want you to know how proud I am." And he had a huge smile on his face, meant a lot to me. He just said, "I just know Church on the Move is in good hands." And I was like, man, that's it for me, because they gave so much and sacrificed so much so that this could be here. And for them to give that up is just so monumental. And then to feel like it's going well is awesome. So it's been really good.
Was there any fear in you stepping into that role? I mean, from the outside you couldn't see it, but internally was there
unfortunately, no. There should have been, yeah. But that's the stupidity of my personality, and that's kind of just immature leadership, but it's just part of it. It's like, I'm ready. And then you get in and you go, oh, wow, I see why my dad was slow. And I see why he was cautious, and I see why he was careful. And the longer I do this, which is only I'm just coming up on 2 years, but just as I really start to settle into this role, the more I appreciate his perspective. I'm starting to hit this phase where it's like, man, all our eyes are kind of looking at you. And it's like, are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? Are we going to buy that? Are we going to spend that money? Are we going to launch this thing? And it's like, whoa. Used to be for so long is like, well, Dad will figure that out. Dad's going to we'll make it happen. I'll go do it. But he's going to have to hear from God. And now it's like, that's the part that's kind of like, oh, wow, there's all these thousands of people. And I'm the one that has to do this. Oh boy, and that's kind of intense.
Yeah. So has it changed the intensity of your relationship with God?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's how God does it with everybody. We're not all going to be senior pastors, but it's in the stepping out of your comfort zone and into unknown territory where I think the greatest growth can happen. What
would you say to a young up-and-coming that's like, hey, my time is now.
Oh, wow.
Get out of the way. Let me have it. What would you say to that guy?
Let the game come to you. Yeah, it's just be patient. I don't think you need to force it. One of the great pieces of advice that we got through this process was it's not mine to take, but it's my dad's to give. If God wanted you in the position to say, it's time, then he would have put you there, but he didn't. Jesus said, I will build my church. He doesn't need you to do it. Paul said, I planted, Apollos watered, it was God who makes it grow. God's not up in heaven going, doggone it, if I could just get him out of the way. Look at what he could do. Look at what would happen. He's not bothered by this whole thing. He's working a plan, and it's working the way he wants it to work. And so just be patient and let God, elevate you when the time is right. I think God calls us to people, to groups of people. And generally, what I've seen is that kind of where we come from and what our experience has been, even the story that you come out of, really does frame kind of who God's sending you to. I would call myself a spiritually stagnant person for a long time in my life. That's the way that I lived. I worked at a church. I had a lot of Bible knowledge because of my upbringing and family background and just church experience. Knew a lot of the stories, but I was spiritually stagnant. And just before the transition happened, we were talking about our mission. And what came out of me was something that just spoke so deeply to my own experience of spiritual stagnation, which is meeting the real Jesus. That's what we talk about, introducing people to the real Jesus. Is that relationship making a real difference in your real life? Because I bump into a lot of church-going people that have all the same junk going on in their lives that everybody else does. And that was me. That was my life. And I believed all the right things technically, but God didn't have my heart. He had some behaviors, but he didn't have all of me. And it was when I was sort of willing to die and realize that I was religious and that part of me needed to die, I started transforming, becoming a different person, growing in patience, peace, joy, love, empathy to people that I wasn't like. And all that started changing me. So my target is for spiritually stagnant people. That's what we're after, because there's a whole lot of them in this part of the world. And how can we invite them to a truly transformative faith and experience with the real Jesus? And that shapes everything that we do. Our whole church is built on that idea of taking people to a faith experience that is more than just, oh, great sermon, Whit, nice music this weekend, I'm part of a small group, but really, truly being discipled and transformed inside out. That's what we're all about.
That's incredible. How has that changed? Like, how's that different from maybe what you did in the past?
I mean, we would do baptisms on Easter, and we would have 1,200 people baptized on Easter every year, like spontaneously. Just get up right now, go be baptized. The problem that we had was that, where are those people? Who knows their name? Are they ever coming back? Or are we just giving birth to babies and then just leaving them on the side of the road, so to speak, spiritually? There's something about the community of believers, the gathering of people, not just to sing songs and not just to listen to, a sermon, but to be in community together, because it's in the community, in the little pockets of community, where transformation starts to happen. So for us, that's something we're super aware of, is that, we're not just doing big events, but we're trying to use that big thing that we're doing to get people into a place where life change can truly happen. And so what we wanted to do is put together a small group curriculum that would walk people through what we would call a real Jesus journey and help them see clearly grace, which is something that I think so few of us really truly understand. And what I realized as I went through my real Jesus journey, I realized that I didn't even know the gospel. Yes, I knew Jesus died for your sins so that I could go to heaven, but I didn't see how the gospel is not just the ABCs of Christianity, it's the A to Z. It's everything. And all of my struggle, all of my heartache, all of my difficulty with my wife, all of it really comes down to a failure to really grasp what is the gospel and to apply it in my life and to use it. And I knew that if I could get people, my thought was, if we could get people in an environment where they're in community and they're studying the gospel together from different vantage points every week, that it would come alive to them like it did to me, and that maybe Jesus would be seen in a significant way, a new way, a fresh way. And then additionally, there was something that we wanted to do at the end of it, which was to help people get free. And so what we did was we created a Real Jesus weekend experience. But it's really 2 days of just taking off weights and setting them down and saying, all right, I'm not carrying that anymore. And I had a lady come up to me a couple of weeks ago at one of our campuses, and she just said, hey, I just want to say thanks for talking about abuse. She said, and I didn't know exactly where she was coming from in the beginning, but turns out she had been to a Real Jesus weekend, the first one that we did last fall. And when she came, she was in an abusive marriage. She had grown up with an abusive father. Both her husband and her father had convinced her that she was partly to blame for their abusive behavior. She was now, with a smile on her face, no longer tied to this abusive marriage, and now looking to help other women who were in a similar situation. That's what happens in that Real Jesus weekend. People, the tears, the emotional response, where people just break when one of our pastors around here stands up on stage and by proxy apologizes as your father for the ways that he's let you down, hurt you. And I mean, there's people, victims of so much, and you just hear people just breaking because they're never going to hear that from their biological father, their stepdad. They're never going to hear, I'm sorry for the way that I treated you. And it's like they just get free. And now they can be who God's called them to be. So not only are they hearing the gospel, but we're dealing with all this baggage that people have been holding on to. And then at the end, we pray for them to receive the Holy Spirit. And it's really beautiful. So yeah, we launched that last fall. We've done it twice, and over 2,000 people have been through it already. And other churches are starting to kind of pick up on this and do it. It's been pretty cool.
So talk about the importance of a church, not just existing maybe in a community, but maybe existing for the community.
Wow. God intended for his people to always be this light to the nations, to care for the community around them. I mean, he's just always talking about the hurting and saying, hey, this is who I am. I identify like this. And even Jesus has some really specific and honestly, quite frankly, terrifying language about, I was in prison and you didn't show up, and I was naked and you didn't clothe me, and I was hungry and you didn't feed me, and I was thirsty and you never offered me a drink. And so I think that the church has such a responsibility because God identifies with the hurting, the broken, and the marginalized of the community, that I see the church has to be for the city, has to be for the community, not just for itself. It's been really convicting for us. One of our staff was with the mayor's office a couple of weeks ago. And we have a new mayor, relatively new mayor, but he's trying to do some good things for our city. But as they sat down and said, hey, we're with Church on the Move, they were like, who? And we're just like, oh, that fires us up. We want to be more involved in community transformation, more involved in racial reconciliation, more involved in lifting people out of poverty and eradicating poverty in our city and dealing with drugs and, all the stuff that just is oppressive. We want to be involved in liberating people because that's who our God is. He's a liberator. He called us out of Egypt. He called us out of sin. We're free. So that's the message that we come with.
Part of that vision is something you call Love Day.
Yeah.
What is that?
So it's something we started a couple of years ago to love our city and to get out and really just set aside a day where we're going to say, we're going to make a huge difference on this day. And we've been trying to kind of figure out, okay, how does this work and what do we want to do? And this year we're doing some new things. We're really trying to partner with our cities that we're in to say, what do you need? What would make the biggest difference? What could we do that you don't have money for? What could we do that would make a difference? One of the things that they told us in just about every community for us is that there are elderly people whose homes are in disrepair and in such disrepair, and they're not up to code, but the city is mandated to do something about it, but they just don't have the funds to do so. Here's a group of people that are alone. Here's a group of people that are in over their heads, can't fix the situation that they're in, and the city is mandated to do something about it, but they can't. And so that's one area that we can have something to do with. We're building relationship with schools right around us, especially underprivileged schools. Here's one of the crazy things. Oklahoma has the highest rate of incarceration of any state in the United States. And because the United States has the highest rate of incarceration per citizen of any country in the world, that means that Oklahoma is the most incarcerated place on the planet. More of our citizens are in prison than any other place. What we're finding is that a predictor of a kid going to prison, right, in the future, starts to happen in around the third grade. If they don't know how to read by the time they're in third grade, the odds of them getting involved in crime and winding up in prison go up exponentially. But if we could partner with third grade kids to read, what might happen? What might change? What might we be able to impact 10, 15, 20 years down the line? And so, it's things like that. And we have schools like this where kids are struggling to read, and they have reading programs. Here's the crazy thing. They just need more partners. They just need more people, adults. And just coming in to say, I'll sit down, I'll take an hour a week or whatever to sit down with, a student who's struggling to read and just work with them. They're just looking for help. Yeah. Do we feel good about just sitting back and going, well, it's tough for you guys. Maybe don't get involved in crime. But when you grow up in a place, in a neighborhood where it's like your options are drug dealer or gang member, what do you expect? These are spiritual problems. And they're not just going to be solved with financial solutions. And here's what's interesting. John 1:14 says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I love the Message translation of that, which says the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. And I think any approach to loving the lost, we look at Jesus as our model. So what did he do? Well, he incarnated himself into the group of people that he was trying to reach. He moved in. And does that mean you have to sell your house and move into the poorest neighborhood? Not necessarily, but it means you're not going to be able to love people from a distance. God didn't write a check when the world was broken. He sent his son. He came himself. And it's like, so can we as Christians in good conscience sit back and say, okay, I'll just write a check, but I don't want to get my hands dirty. And I don't think we can. Yeah. And I think that's what Jesus calls us. That's what was done for us. So I think we follow our model, our Savior, our example.
And I love Pastor Whit's authenticity, his honesty, their approach to ministry, and they just have a self-awareness of what they do really well. And he has an honesty of their imperfections and where they're continually improving. And I just love the transformation I've seen in him, to move from someone that is very passionate about the details of how a service looks and feels, to seeing him transition to having the heart of a pastor, where he cares about the individual. He cares about every person in the congregation and is asking himself the question, how are we helping them be introduced to the real Jesus? Because we know when people are introduced to the real Jesus, there's going to be real life change. And to see the journey that they're taking to continually redefine themselves. They're not stuck in we got to do it this way. We've got to behave this way. It's really about, we're following God on this journey, building his church, a church that's making a difference in people's lives. And so I'm very grateful. We celebrate with them the success on their transition. Pastor Willie being the founding pastor of this church and transitioning to his son. We celebrate Whit and his leadership and his commitment to the truth of who Jesus is and the power of Jesus and how he's leading this church. And so what a great conversation.